Later, during a mountaineering expedition to K2, the world's second highest mountain in the Himalayas, several of the team died, with Crowley being blamed for it. He had to escape from India after allegedly murdering 2 men who he said tried to rob him. And even after his death, there was tragedy at Boleskine House when a subsequent owner committed suicide there. But curiously, those who actually knew Crowley don't have a bad word to say against the man. In this interview recorded in 1955, one of his Café Royal cronies, Louis Marlowe, maintained Crowley was not the font of all evil that he liked to pretend he was, and that others seemed delighted to portray him as.
People seem to forget that he had his tongue in his cheek, that he had a very acute sense of humor indeed. One can remember a great many extraordinarily witty and brilliant things that he said. Of course, some of them are not quite repeatable. But he was a character who ought not to be represented simply as a figure of evil and a tool of the devil and a black magician. I think he's a man who will be remembered, and remembered simply because of the potency of his own identity.
Another regular acquaintance was novelist Christopher Isherwood. Isherwood and his close friend Gerald Hamilton got to know Crowley in Berlin during the 30s, as Hamilton recalled in this archive interview.
Isherwood and I went to call on him when he was in Berlin and had an exhibition of his paintings all to himself, opened by some important German. I had never met him before, but he was very anxious for us both to call and see him. From that day onwards, a certain friendship sprung up, and I enjoyed his company as much as I hope he may have enjoyed mine. The terrible wickedness which is still attached to his name, the wickedest man in the world, as he liked to be called, made me roar with laughter, because in point of fact, as I got to know him very well, both in Berlin and in London afterwards, I found him to be really a bon bourgeois who liked a good cigar, good wines, a good meal, and above everything else, a good game of chess. He's fortunate in his biographer, John Simons, who's written 2 lives of Crowley, and who has very distinctly portrayed his amazing character. Erudite, a little inclined to be drunken, and above all, kind-hearted. That was how I found Aleister Crowley.
Crowley certainly did have an acute sense of humor. He published a series of hilarious limericks, many about people with whom he'd fallen out, and mostly unbroadcastable. But since his death, a significant number of people have taken Crowley more seriously than he probably took himself. His resurrection during the hippie years of the 60s raised him to the status of a cult hero. The Rolling Stones were moved by his influence to record an entire album around the theme of black magic, Their Satanic Majesty's Request. And you'll find Crowley's picture among the faces on the Beatles' classic Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And particularly in the United States, Crowleyanity has an increasing following.
A lot of people do take Crowley seriously. I personally find that I don't like Crowley. I don't like anything that he did. I don't like the personality. But he obviously has a very strong effect on a lot of people. See, his philosophy, do what thou wilt, is very appealing, isn't it? I think that Crowley probably was a man totally without conscience, maybe someone that we would call a psychopath today.
He certainly had his tongue in his cheek, and he didn't think he was wicked at all. I'd point out that he really did some pretty disgusting and nasty things. He was a sort of extremely unpleasant man in many ways. I've written biographies of several people, including Shaw and Rasputin, but Crowley is the first person that I would not have liked to have met. His absolute loathing of authority, of course, was exactly what the hippies loved. He seemed to be, a bit like Wilhelm Reich, a figure who preached freedom, let it all hang out, do what you like. And I think this was the reason that the Beatles put his picture on their Sgt. Pepper album, and his books really began to sell once again. Oh, he would have become a kind of hippie saint if he'd still been around in the 60s. He died, of course, in 1947.
He has left a legacy, and there is a lot of people involved with Crowley and what he has left behind. Indeed, I know one or two that are very, very steeped in Crowleyism. And you look for more power, you crawl more power, you work at more power, and then it can destroy you in the end, like I said earlier. Because even though the man died in 1947, the power that he has left behind is still there, and the demons are still going about. I believe that if they can still latch on to them, because I know that things do happen when people become involved deeply in the Crowleyism. Things going wrong, accidents happening, things happening out of the blue that shouldn't be happening at all, like things in the house going wrong, darkness round about, shades of the unknown coming round about rooms and people and noises on stairs, which I've heard people complain about.
But the man who now occupies Crowley's house hasn't been enchanted by the magic of the great beast. Malcolm Dent says Crowley's legacy is something he'd rather be without, and it's not only the spiritual visitations to Boleskine which he finds disturbing.
I wish he'd get out of my life. I think that because of Crowley, we are invaded constantly with visitors claiming knowledge or interest or whatever in the occult, who come here and want to feel the aura of the house or feel the aura of Crowley's spirits or whatever, and I don't approve of that. I don't like it. It interrupts my life. And on top of that, I think that some of these people are, they're really in a state of ignorance as to what the occult really means and what it can do. I do think some of the people certainly that visit are dangerous sorts of people. I've had curses put on me by people. I've had people conducting rituals against me because I've been rude and tried to get rid of them. And I have seen people who I've asked to go away then turn up in the burial ground, which is in our ground, just below the house here, conducting all sorts of strange rituals and stuff in there. The man's dead. I wish a lot of people would realize that.
Deep-mouthed from their thrones deep-seated, the choirs of the eons declare the last of the demons defeated. For man is the lord of the air. Arise, O man, in thy strength. The kingdom is thine to inherit, till the high gods witness at length that man is the lord of his spirit.